My name is Dan Dorval, and I'm President and CEO of Dorval and Cherney Financial Advisors. I am an independent certified financial planner and author of my book, Financial Success for the Rest of Us, Reality-Based Financial Planning for Mainstream America.
Hi, my name is Leah Woodley. I'm an associate financial advisor with Dorval and Cherney Financial Advisors. Our conversations discuss what it means to do quality of life planning in all areas of your life.
Dan, we often hear financial literacy as a big topic in our industry and really just in this nation. The World Economic Forum recently put out a publication stating that about 50% of Americans are financially literate, and this is down by 2%. Well, this is down from 2 years ago. Essentially, they give people of different generations an exam, testing their knowledge in areas of borrowing, saving, consuming, earning, being able to go to info sources, investing, insuring, and comprehending risk. So they found that most of those people were familiar with how borrowing and saving work. The two lowest areas were insuring and comprehending risk. What are some of your thoughts about this?
It's a big part of what we do, obviously, is this idea of helping individuals at a personal level. And we commonly hear financial service professionals talk about, hey, literacy should be taught in high school. And I look at that and I go, well, yeah, I'm not going to argue with that. Certainly at a basic level, it'd be awesome for somebody to graduate high school, know what a checking account is, very basic stuff, what a credit card is, how it works, all of those types of things. But when you start to get into financial planning, that becomes so personal. And what we see is there's so much information out in the world. So if somebody is financially illiterate right now, right, at least by the definition of whatever their standards are, they could easily have found the information they needed to be financially literate. It's out there in the world. They just don't value that information enough to go out and get it because, in my experience, they're not tying that information directly to their quality of life. They're not thinking in terms of, if I make this decision, I'm aligning my resources better with what actually enhances my quality of life, not yours, not my friends or families or coworkers, but my life. Mm-hmm. And that really would not be able to be taught like at high school or something like that. So from my perspective, I think there's these differentials of what financial literacy means, because when you refer to understanding risk, mm-hmm. human bias, like we are all just filled with all sorts of behavioral, we're pretty messed up people when it comes to finances, frankly. And so that idea of understanding human behavior and realizing the risk or lack of risk that I'm taking, that's going to be so difficult for somebody to ever teach other than at a personal level.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I think for me, I guess this gets into behavioral finance, where sometimes I don't think people understand the consequence of their decisions, and that can be a positive consequence or that could be a negative consequence. But I think sometimes there's a lack of understanding of how this decision is going to impact everything else. But that does go back to what you're saying about understanding quality of life, which, like you said, is not something that can necessarily be taught. But I do think that it is important to educate people on how risk in various situations. I know sometimes we think of risk just in investing, but risk plays a part in different types of financial aspects. So I think it's important for people to have an understanding of, if I do this, then this could happen, and be able to make better informed decisions.
Well, and you see it at such a basic level of something like an emergency reserve. Mm-hmm. And this gets into something I talk about a lot, is the difference of risk, even just with genders. So men and women. And in most cases, not all, because of course, if we're going to stereotype, not all men, not all women are going to feel the exact same way. But in general, what happens is women want to know they're going to be okay. We hear that all the time from the nurses that we help. So they will like to have, in most cases, some emergency reserve. They will gain comfort from knowing I have some money if something bad happens. Now, they might be hesitant to use it when something bad happens. We do see that a lot. They'll even put it on a credit card instead of using their reserves. But they do get comfort from knowing they have reserves. Well, men see that risk as not really being a risk. What we do is we have a natural tendency to assume we will be okay. And if I assume we'll be okay, I don't see emergencies as being a risk, because we'll just do whatever we have to do to make it work anyway. Like it doesn't give me the same sense of satisfaction to have an emergency reserve as it would for a typical nurse that we help that's female. And yeah, go ahead.
So do you feel that educating and understanding the consequences and the risk associated with certain things, do you feel like it becomes irrelevant because this by nature is how men and women are?
That's a great question. A long time ago, I wrote my book. So 2004, published my book. And an entity reached out to me at some point, shortly after it was published. And they said, at the time, there was a whole bunch of discussion in the government about what do we do with bankruptcy laws? Because we have these people who get in trouble. We have bankruptcy laws for a reason. Some people get in trouble because of bad decisions, but a lot of people get in trouble through no fault of their own. They just, health or whatever, job loss, and they ran into some issues. And so this group came to me and they said, the government is now mandating that before you go through bankruptcy, you have to take like a pre-bankruptcy class, and then you have to take like a post-bankruptcy class. And there was a whole bunch of money involved because the federal government was funding all this. So all these companies were coming out and said, well, we'll make a class. And as long as we get it approved by the government, we will then, we'll be able to make money from these users. And they're going to have to take someone's class. And their perspective was, well, we want a certified financial planner to help us put this together. And we read your book and we thought it was awesome at this basic level of understanding financial literacy associated with this. So I worked with them. They paid me money. I worked with them. The book was the foundation of the class. And we put together all of this financial literacy stuff. And in the end, I'm looking at it going, I wonder how useful this is, because nobody ever evaluated that I'm aware of. Like when somebody went through the class, do they come out the other end and say, oh, now I get it. I was making a bad decision. Or was it, well, I went through bankruptcy. I had to take this class. I went through, I verified I did it, and now I'm done with bankruptcy. My guess is for most people, it was the latter rather than the former. Now, I could be wrong. I don't know. But we see this stuff every day, Leah, even in the sense of how subjective risk might be. So somebody comes in, they use the words, I immediately perk up when somebody says, my investments are conservative. My investments are aggressive. Or I'm some kind of moderate. And then we'll look at what they actually have. And somebody who's 60 plus years old, especially a man, will come in and go, my portfolio is pretty conservative. And we look at what they own and they have 100% stocks. But subjectively, they think, oh, well, I'm comfortable with the risk involved in this, whether they understand that risk or not. Because when I start to describe they could lose 50% of their portfolio, since that's been done twice in the last 24 years, they start to go, maybe that is more risk than I want to take on. But until you feel these things, until you experience them, it is so hard for people to know.
I agree with that completely. I definitely agree. I think it takes you experiencing it and you going through it for it to really hit home. So that educational piece, I mean, it's good to have, but it doesn't have as great of an impact as you experiencing something for yourself. So I am definitely in agreement with that. I think that I think it's good that financial literacy is in the school, but I am in agreement with you that it shouldn't try to turn into a financial planning course or anything like that. I think people do need to have a basic awareness of how things work. I think we even do that in our meetings. We do educate our clients on what this is, why you need it, why you should have it, why you shouldn't have it, those type of things. But I think just having that basic knowledge is enough.
And yeah, it's when nurses come in and they're meeting with us under our group advisory agreement, right? So, we're, as a reminder to our viewers, we're paid to be available to help these people under our group advisory agreement. So many of them come in. And if I ask them, how much would you say you know about finances in general? And they go, nothing. I mean, I know nothing. And sometimes that's almost better, because if they just defer to us as an advisor and say, oh, you're the one who knows how this works, they just take the appropriate actions that we suggest they do to align with their quality of life. They don't need to understand all the details of all the stuff. I tell nurses all the time, you don't know a lot about finances. I don't know anything about being a nurse.
Mm-hmm.
So if I go into a hospital and I need some sort of a treatment or whatever, I want to understand what the action items are and how they're going to improve my quality of life. I don't need to know all the minutia of how it works and all of that stuff, because I have to trust that my healthcare professionals know how that works, just like they have to trust us that we know how that works in their situation.
So do you think that's a generational thing? Because I do think younger generations now want to know the minutia and want to be DIYers. And I think sometimes that can be a dangerous position to be in, because I think sometimes they listen to noise that they shouldn't listen to and take advice that may not be sound, and junk in, junk out.
Oh yeah. That's the biggest challenge, I think, for, my kids are 22 and 19 years old. And I think one of their biggest challenges is they are inundated with information. And to be able to determine, okay, junk in, junk out, or is this actually useful information? And how do I, so like, I used to talk about financial advisors being a source of information for people to improve their financial literacy or to improve their understanding of how things work. Now, I would argue we are much more of a filter of information. So all of these people we're helping, they're inundated with facts and opinions and all this different stuff, TikTok, Instagram, whatever. And we have to often say, okay, hold on a second. Like that might be a thing, but it doesn't even apply to you. So you don't need to worry about that. Like, just filter that out. Focus on this stuff, because this is what actually applies to you. And in so many cases, that's the value we're offering to these relationships.
I love that. I love that. I never thought of that as we're a filter now. But that is so true. Well, this is a wonderful conversation. I hope that people think about financial literacy in a new light and see how it may or may not apply to your own situation. But most importantly, try to think about what your quality of life is, what your goals are, what your values and priorities are, and make your decisions based on that and not necessarily the noise you hear around you.
Or your neighbors, or your friends, or your family.
Absolutely. Well, until next time, make sure you like this video, subscribe to our channel, and tune in for our next video.